Welcome to Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. It's like coffee with an analyst, but there's no actual coffee. Each episode, we interviewed an expert in the field of law enforcement analysis to share their career-defining stories and to get their insights on the world. Please join us on recognizing and learning from these brilliant minds as we define the law enforcement analysis profession one episode at a time.
Thank you for joining me. I hope many aspects of your life are progressing. My name is Jason Elder, and today our guest has 23 years of law enforcement analysis experience, all with the Mesa, Arizona Police Department. She is a multi-award-winning analyst and an active member of both the IACA and Arizona Association of Crime Analysis. Please welcome the current Secretary of IACA, Kristen Lottman. Kristen, how are we doing?
I am doing great. How are you, Jason?
I am doing very well. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's get into this. How did you discover the law enforcement analysis profession?
Yeah, it kind of fell on me in high school. It definitely wasn't a career path that I was even thinking about until one day I had two police officers come to one of my classes, and they just kind of talked about their jobs. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. Up until that point, I think I was thinking military. And so it was just an interesting diversion that I ended up taking. So I went on to graduate high school and I started a community college, and I got into a really good criminal justice program there. And I had a phenomenal instructor who was retired from Scottsdale, Arizona. And he just really kind of took me under his wing and guided me through classes and worked with me to find my interests, and just really got me involved in different clubs across campus so that I could experience everything within the criminal justice world. And then he came to me one day and he said, I really think you should do an internship as part of one of your classes. And so I said, okay, well, what does that entail? And he said, well, we can really make it look whatever you want. We'll just call it an internship, and you get in and do a project and write a paper on it, and that'll be your class. And I said, well, that sounds great to me. So we explored different agencies and talked to me about my interests. And we have a bunch of different agencies within the Phoenix metro area, big, small. I knew I didn't want to go with Phoenix PD. That was way too big. And Scottsdale PD, we talked about that. It was really small at the time. And so he was thinking, well, maybe you should go to like more of a medium-sized agency. And that's how I ended up going with Mesa. And so I applied to be an intern with Mesa. They didn't technically call them interns, they called them volunteers, but it was the same kind of concept. So I applied with Mesa, and looking at the different job opportunities that were available to interns at the time, I saw one that really kind of piqued my interest, knowing that I wanted to go sworn, and it was working with the victim assistance program. And so what that entailed was responding out to crime scenes and working with victims after the fact with really whatever they needed crisis intervention wise. But I thought it would be a good opportunity to not only get to meet the officers on scene, but learn how to navigate the city, respond on a radio. So I thought it would be really good hands-on experience. So I went through the application process. It was about 6 months to get hired on. And then it was like a bait and switch, I guess you could call it. The volunteer coordinator, she brought me in. She said, well, welcome. We're so happy to have you. I just have to tell you, you're actually not old enough to do victims assistance. So I'm thinking I have a really good opportunity in this place called crime analysis. And I was like, what? So she took me in. I got to meet the analysts that were there, and it was all desk jobs. And I went home and I cried that night. It was not what I expected. And it turned out you had to be 21 in order to do victims assistance, and I wasn't there. And so anyway, I started crime analysis in there doing some projects, and I actually really enjoyed it. And so it was kind of funny. I had to do different like ride-alongs as part of my introduction process. And so I actually got to do ride-alongs with our communications department and in our holding facility and in a couple of other areas. We went on patrol too. And I found that I really liked the holding facility. And so I started volunteering in both crime analysis and the holding facility, running the control room there. And so I ended up getting a ton of experience with both the crime analysis side and then the more sworn side, where I got to spend time with the officers in the holding facility. So that was kind of my intro.
And so the holding facility, is that with inmates coming in, the processing people that have been arrested?
Yeah. So we can only hold them up to 24 hours and then they go over to our county jail, but that's where we process them after the arrest.
So were you 21 at the time?
No.
So you were old enough to deal with inmates, but you weren't old enough to deal with the victims.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Now that's interesting stuff. To be 19, 20, 21 years old and have volunteer opportunities like that in the field, man, that's a great start and an early start. How do you think about that once you look back now?
It was life-changing for me. I mean, I can guarantee you I would not be in the position I'm in today if I hadn't had those experiences. And it's one of the things I love working with students and people coming into the field. And I know it's not always easy advice to hear, but the first thing that I always tell people is get in. Even if you can't get your foot in the door with a paid position, get in as a volunteer and get to know the people. Because honestly, that's how I ended up getting hired officially, was because people knew me. I had name recognition. I had met a bunch of people. I had worked across different areas of the department. So by the time I actually became employed with Mesa, they already knew me and they knew my skill sets, they knew my personality. And so I opened a lot of doors just by doing that.
They knew you were reliable.
Yes.
So what were some of the tasks that you were doing as a volunteer for crime analysis?
So I started, the initial project that they had me on was we had a database that tracked domestic violence cases. And so tracking all kinds of different variables with DV cases, ages. We were looking for repeat victims, repeat suspects, children who were involved that, the cycle hits the children too. And so it was really just kind of capturing all of the elements for domestic violence. So it was very specific on that. As I kept working with crime analysis, then I was given a gang project and they actually brought me in on a grant in partnership with ASU. And so we were tracking gang members at the time, looking at recidivism and gang members and just to track them. Mm-hmm. And so I was brought on as a paid contract employee at that point, just to work with gang members. And so, yeah, it was just interesting, just kind of evolved from there.
So then did you ever get a chance to volunteer with the victims?
I did. Yep. So in conjunction with that, I should go back. And while I was with crime analysis, I had some amazing opportunities. Every time there was a free seat in a class, I know crime analysis was around long before I started, but that point seemed to be kind of, to me, at least, that was when it was heightening within at least Mesa, this whole concept of crime analysis. So we were bringing in all kinds of trainings and I had all kinds of opportunities to attend free trainings with crime analysis. So I did that until I turned 21. And then, yes, I got over into the victims assistance and I loved that, responding to the scenes, working with the victims. I met some amazing people at some of the worst times in their life, but just game changing as far as learning about people and human nature and human behavior and just talking to people.
What's the training like?
It was, I don't remember how long, if you put it all together, it was several nights, like over the course of several weeks. Mm-hmm. So each night was dedicated to a different, this night might be on dealing with a sexual assault case, and this might be working with a natural death case, and this would be working with a domestic violence case, and all the resources, they gave us all the resources we needed. I liked working the night shift. It worked with my school schedule at the time. And so I usually worked weekends on the graveyards. And so we were paired up. I had a partner and it worked out really well because he was getting ready for the academy too. So we had a lot in common. So we would respond to scenes together typically. But because it was the night, it seems like that's when most of the death cases come in. And so most of the calls that I took were death cases.
Do you still respond if it's a death case?
Yep. Even it's just on the natural death cases, it was really up to the person. So the officers would respond. And if family members who were still there looked like they needed somebody, the officers would ask, would you like our victims assistance program to come out and sit with you? And so then we would be called, and not everybody asked for that. And so not every call, but there were definitely, I would say every shift I worked, I was going to at least one call.
Man. So is there a moment that sticks out to you during this time?
There's several, but there was one that was just a really special case to me. And it was this lady who, she was really distraught because the way that it happened was her husband had passed away and she called 911. And when the fire department got there, they started working on him, but he had a do not resuscitate, a DNR. And so technically the fire wouldn't work on that, but they couldn't find the DNR. And so fire had to work on him until they were able to locate that piece of paper for them. And it really upset her. And so that's when I was called in, and I came in. By the time I got there, he was pronounced. So I just sat with her, and it was just, I was young. I was very young. I mean, I had just barely turned 21 at the time, and she was sitting in the corner, and they were older. They had been married, I think, 80 some years.
Wow.
So I kneeled in front of her and I said, "What can I do for you?" And she just sat and talked to me. And then she cupped my face and she said, "You're so sweet. And thank you for being here." And I said, "Can I ask you something?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "You were married for that long. What's your secret?" She just kind of smiled. She gave me this advice and she said, "If you never argue, it means that one of you is always giving in." And something about that it resonated with me. And so for marriage advice, for relationship advice across the board, it doesn't matter, interpersonal, work related. That's just something I've always held on to. I always need to hold my voice. And if I have something that I need to say, I need to say it. Otherwise, I'm always giving in. So it's just kind of stuck with me.
Yeah, you're so argumentative. Well, that is fantastic. This is late 90s, correct?
Yeah, and early into the early 2000s. Yep.
Okay. So again, you're not even graduated from college. You are seeing and experiencing so much of the law enforcement profession, from the crime stats with crime analysis, with arrest, doing the intake, volunteer work, and then seeing it from the victim side of things. What great experience you had at such a young age.
Yes.
So, because you said you did some contract work, then you got established as a crime analyst.
Yes. So I was doing the contract stuff. I was actually in the process of being hired for the police officer recruit position. And again, you had to be 20 and a half to go into the academy so that when you were graduated at 21, I could carry a firearm. And so I was just kind of pushing it off until that point. But around this time, I had an academy date and I ended up getting injured. And at the same time, there was an analyst position opening and I was already there. And so I thought, well, I'll put in for this because I don't know how long I'm going to be out. And so I'm already here and I already know I love it. So I might as well do it and get paid for it. So I put in for it. It turned out after the fact, my boss had sat me down and she said, "You don't have your degree yet. I have to tell you, you were up against some extremely credentialed people. But because we know you, because you've been here and you've been experienced and we know your personality and we know that you can do the job, I feel confident in you. And so we expect you to get your degree and finish that out. But that's why you got the job." And so I try to tell students that too, again, going back to proving yourself before, you can't just rely on that piece of paper. It's you have to rely on your skills too. And I got really lucky. I don't know. I just feel really blessed with my career.
Yeah, and I feel the same way when I look back. Got a lot of no's. I got a lot of doors closed on me, but eventually broke through. And I really feel blessed of the opportunities that I did have. So it's interesting looking back at this. I think it's fascinating that you started so young and you established yourself. Here you are without a degree and you're working with everybody. I mean, a lot of guests that I talk to is like, geez, in the beginning, nobody would trust me. I had to create opportunities or I had to establish my reputation, and that took a while. From your perspective, coming in with all that experience before you have the degree, before you can even legally drink, and you establish yourself as a trusted member of the Mesa Police Department.
Yeah, it's I don't know, for every student that listens, I don't know. To me, that was the way to go. But
so when did you decide that I'm going to stay with analysis and not go back to the dream of becoming an officer?
So that choice again was, I won't say made for me, but it just kind of worked out. Even after I healed, I ended up getting pregnant with my daughter, and that was a game changer. There was no way I was going to go to the street after that. And by that point, honestly, I don't think I would have even considered it anyway. I was in love with what I did. Had some really just great mentors with Mesa and outside, and I loved working with them. They got me excited about the job, and it was just fun. It was fun to come to work every day. And so I think I just never looked back.
Let's talk about you starting out as an analyst. Even though you had been there for years, did you still have some growing pains or something unexpected or lessons learned during this time?
Oh, there were definitely a lot of lessons learned early on. And fortunately, I had some really experienced analysts that were willing to help walk me through it. I would say probably my two mentors early on were Pete Garza and Michelle Phillips. And Michelle Phillips ended up passing away a couple of years after I started, but she was really instrumental in the beginning part of my career. My first project that I was given that was a big project was to give a community presentation to a group of, we have winter visitors. That's a big thing in our city. And so we had to give this presentation, and I had never done a presentation, and I certainly hadn't done one with stats. And I started going down rabbit holes left and right. And she came over and I was really frustrated one day. And I said, I just don't know where to stop. I could just keep going all day long with this analysis. And she goes, you can't, and you have to know your audience. And so she kind of pulled me back and just helped me understand, we're in law enforcement. This is a fast-paced moving organization. You're going to present evidence and analysis to these people, and you have to make it in a way that's understandable and that they'll be able to digest and that's relevant to them. So it was just nice to have those early mentors to talk to and to work through some of those growing pains.
So how many of those were you doing? Was that a whole series of presentations?
I ended up doing more. That was the first one. At the time, we had a unit of an official crime analysis unit. Mm-hmm. It wasn't long after that we ended up being decentralized. And so the way our organization looks even today is we were broken apart and put into different areas of the department, and each one of us has a different chain of command. So it really just depended on where we were at. But for my district at the time, I did a lot of those presentations. After that, I did more of the building of it, and then our crime prevention officers would take it from there. So that first one was really the one that I did, and then I turned it over.
I think it's interesting you went through a decentralization process. Looking back at it now, you think that was successful? Do you think they should have stayed centralized?
So there's pros and cons to both. I think it was nice to be able to be in a core group of analysts and know that I had backups, and to always have somebody next to you who could review just an email even. Can you make sure that people can understand it? But once we were decentralized, I found it easier to embed myself with my detectives and my officers and really kind of get into the thick of the problems. And it built rapport with them. And so they were more likely to come to me. So that was the benefit, the biggest benefit of being decentralized, was that I was part of them. They didn't have to come to me. I was already with them. But we were definitely missing that overarching person who looks out for you as a team. We lost the person who was speaking on our behalf, advocating for our role and advocating for the updated software and programs that we needed. So that was the con.
It was beneficial that you had it centralized in the beginning, and then you got to branch out and go back to the district because you could take all that advice and learning with you.
Yes.
So then you become a process improvement crime analyst. I assume it's not with the district. Is it with a different unit?
It was a brand new unit. We had a chief come on just a few years before that, and he had brought the whole CompStat model, the big CompStat model from LAPD. And so we had just gotten done going through that. And I was at the district, and I got a call from a sergeant one day. And she said, I know you don't know me, but I heard your name and I heard that you might be good for this project. We're looking to start up this new team, and it would be just you and I. And I said, well, what is it? And she said, well, it's looking at process improvement projects. We would be going into different areas of the department and at the chief's direction. So these would be problems that were identified by the chief that he really wanted to focus on. How do we improve this or make it better, more efficient? The more she talked, the more intrigued I was. It was different than crime analysis, but also not. Some of the same concepts. We were analyzing a process versus crime. So it was intriguing to me. And so I said yes. And so we were a two-man band after that.
So that seems like administrative analysis. Is that how you would describe it?
Very much, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So what was the main project that you all were working on?
We were both going to be certified as green belts in Six Sigma. And so we each had to take on a big project. And so to be certified as a green belt, you have to come up with a project that's going to save the organization more than $50,000 at the end of it. She had a couple of projects that I joined her on, and then she helped champion my project. And the project that I was given was in our hiring unit. And at the time, it was taking quite a while to get employees through our background process, through the entire hiring process. And we noticed that we were losing really qualified candidates because it was taking so long to get them through. And so by the time we were able to offer them a job, they had already accepted a job with another agency or organization. And so the chief really wanted to see how we could cut that processing time down. So that became my project.
So just quickly, for those that
Sure.
don't know what Six Sigma is, could you quickly explain that?
Six Sigma is just, it really gives you a set of tools that you can use to look at a process. You define the process, you look at it, you see where there's gaps, where you can make small tweaks or changes, improvements. But the whole idea of it is to remove the waste within a project to make it as efficient as possible. Okay. So that's in a nutshell.
And then what does it mean to be a green belt?
It's just a certification. It's like being a certified analyst. It just means that you've been able to show that you understand the concepts to run a project.
Then let's just get back to the project then. What was the specific problems that you found with the process and how did you remedy them?
So, yeah, I mean, as a crime analyst, we don't really look at hiring. I mean, I'd never worked with hiring before. So you're going into an area, and the first hurdle that you have to get over is not unlike what crime analysts deal with on a day-to-day basis. I had to prove myself. I had to show them that I was trustworthy and that I wasn't there to just pull the rug out from underneath them because the chief had this idea. And so building rapport was really the first thing that we went in and did, more of like team building so that I could learn their process. And then we had to really define the problem. That there's so many different elements that go into hiring. And I learned so much during that process, because when an employee is hired with a law enforcement agency, there's usually state guidelines for hiring that person. And then each agency also has guidelines. And so they don't always match eye to eye. And so kind of learning those little nuances, and then there's different procedures for each type of position. So a civilian might not go through the same process as a sworn member would. And so we really had to figure out, who are we targeting with this first? We can't tackle the whole thing. We have to really pick a narrow group. And so we decided on narrowing the time it took to hire a police officer recruit. And I think at the time it was taking about an average of 96 days to get a new police officer recruit through the program or through the hiring process. And so we really wanted to set a goal to cut that down to 75 days. But then we had to define, what are we saying the hiring process is? Is it from the time they put their application in until the time they start the academy? Is it when we offer them a conditional offer? Is it when we decide that they're an acceptable candidate? Because there's different things. We can decide that you're an acceptable candidate, but we might not have an academy ready for you for 2 months. So Are we going to tack on that 2 months to the process, or are we going to call it at the acceptable mark? And that's what we ended up doing, was usually at the acceptable mark. That's when like a conditional would go out. So we define the process as for a police officer recruit from a time of application to the time that we determine them acceptable or unacceptable for duty.
So what were some solutions put in place to achieve this goal?
So we did some surveys. We did some voice of customer surveys of some previous police officer recruits. What worked well with the hiring process? What didn't you like? What would have changed your mind? We tried to reach out to the people who had left and said, why didn't you take a job with us? So we did a lot of surveys like that, but we really tore into the hiring process and looked at, where are we losing the most people and what points in the process are taking the most time? We really kind of revamped the way that the hiring process happens. So say the physical fitness, let's say, 75% of people don't pass the physical fitness test, and we had that maybe at the end. Well, we're waiting until we get them through every other step of the process to find out that they're going to fail through that. So why don't we move that to the front? So if you can't pass physical fitness up front, you're eliminated just right off the bat, because we know that you're probably going to fail the backside too. And so we ended up, actually, the physical fitness is at the front and the back end, if I remember correctly, and if they've kept it the same. But another point is the written. So those are like the two big fail points right there. So if you can eliminate people on the front end, then it saves time in the background process to actually make contacts and for the background investigators to do their job. So looking for those fail points was really part of the process and cleaning it up.
So that, from an outsider's point of view, that seems like a pretty simple solution, right? You're not introducing a new concept or a new step in the process. You're just rearranging the steps.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
It just, in law enforcement, we like what we like and we do what we do. And we've done it because we've always done it. And so it was a game changer. And so, we ruffled some feathers.
Was the team more open to that because it was just rearranging the steps and you weren't getting rid of anybody or you weren't getting rid of anybody's task? It was just doing it in a different order.
Yeah, I think at first they were afraid that they would lose work. But then when they saw the process come together and they realized that it would actually give them more time to do what they were hired to do, being background investigators, I think that helped. And they were part of the team. So we built a team of our SMEs, which they were the SMEs. And so they really had a voice during the process. And so I think that helped kind of ease the way into it. And I don't remember any big issues coming out of it after that. And yeah, it just kind of worked, but it was a big process.
And this is 2008, right?
Yes.
So I think it's fascinating. I didn't hear of deep dive, process improvement until, I guess it was probably 2012. And so I never heard about it when I was in law enforcement. I think, unfortunately, from my experience in law enforcement and what I've heard from other folks is that the only time you get real change is when you have a change in leadership, right? It's somebody new comes in and they start asking you questions of like, why are you doing that? And they'll say, well, that's because we always did it that way. And that's the kind of triggers the change of start analyzing how to improve the process. It would be nice if departments would go in having a periodic deep dive of the process and not have to rely on turnover, change in leadership to establish process improvement.
Yes. Going back to crime analysis, I think a lot of the skills that I learned during that process, I just carried through to future assignments. So the process for running one of these projects, they call it the DMAIC model, which is DMAIC, define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. Just thinking about crime analysis projects, a lot of times we know what our problems are, we look at it, but we're not really defining why. And on the back end, we certainly aren't looking at ways of making sure whatever changes we're recommending stay implemented and then going back and reevaluating them. A lot of times we're reactive instead of just going back and looking at our process again to make sure that it's still working. And so that's always something that I've tried to carry through after working that assignment. I always look at my projects and the assignments that I'm given and how much of this is actually useful at this point, or do I need to go back and reinvent the wheel or revamp part of it?
Yeah, that's definitely something that I've seen. And I even did this when I was an analyst. Next case. I just got done with that case. What's the next one? And not necessarily thinking about how can I improve the process for next time. Now, there's lessons learned, don't get me wrong. But when I talk to some folks outside of the United States and they don't have that distinction between are they crime analysts or they intelligence analysts, they're just analysts. They'll look at something and not only are they looking to solve the crime, but they're also looking to solve the problem and identify the problem. And I think in the States, it seems like we're always one or the other. Either we're problem solving or we're tactical. And for some reason, a lot of departments have trouble doing both.
Yes, I would agree with that. I know in our agency, we're broken up by district. You're responsible for everything. So we're doing all types of analysis. So you have to be a jack of all trades and you always have to go back and look at your process.
All right. Well, let's take a break. When we come back, I want to finish up with your career and we'll get into your analyst badge story. And of course, I also want to talk to you about the IACA and the Arizona Crime Analysis Association. This is Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Mary Bertuccelli. Would you like to solve a cold case? If your answer is yes, then enter a cold case from your agency into VICAP, the FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program. Thanks.
I also wanted to mention friends of the show. These are folks that have helped us out through the year. The Rough and Tumble, the folks that are responsible for the intro and outro, the music for the podcast. Mallory and Scott have a new album, a year of not touring, and now they're back. They had lots of time to write, and so they have a new album called We're Only Family If You Say So, and they actually also have a brand new music video out, their song Painter's Sorrow. In terms of the graphics for the show, Kyle McMullen, check his stuff out at moderntype.com. Please help those that have helped us and check out their stuff. Welcome back, Kristen. So you were there about a year with that process improvement task. Did that end there, or did you decide to just go back to the district?
It was about a year and a half, and the sergeant who I was working with was getting ready to promote. And so our 2-man band was done at that point. I couldn't just do it myself. So she was actually getting ready to take over as commander at one of the districts. And so she took me with her.
Okay.
And so I went back to the district that way.
All right. You're there until 2017, in which you then transferred to is it the Criminal Investigations Division?
It is, but I'm embedded in the homicide unit.
Okay. So you go over to homicide. So why did you make the jump from the district to homicide?
It was a new position. We hadn't had an analyst assigned to homicide ever. We had ones that were assigned to our overall criminal investigations, but the opportunity in homicide was pretty unique and it was brand new and it was kind of intriguing. And it was a tough decision because I was extremely happy where I was at the district. I loved it. People that I was working with. And so it was hard, but I couldn't let the opportunity pass. I had to try.
Did you put in for it or did someone ask you?
No, I put in for it.
Yep. All right. I thought somebody might ask you. I thought you were like the person that says, oh, we'll just give it to Kristen. She'll figure it out.
Sometimes. Yeah. Sometimes that happens.
So you transfer over. It's a brand new position. So I'm guessing you're dealing with detectives that aren't used to analysis. Is that the growing pains you go through in the beginning? Yeah.
And so, there was that. And then I was going from more of a strategic and tactical analysis world to I was going to be taking on intel, which was completely new to me. I had never really, I dabbled in it at the district, but not to the degree that I knew I was walking into. And that really worried me. And so I actually signed up for a mentoring program with IACA, and I was assigned a mentor from the FBI who was instrumental in getting me kind of my footing and making me feel like I was a little bit more secure starting off, because our homicide unit is filled with experience. Like there are kind of our senior detectives. They all have experience. The one who had the most just retired. He had 17 years doing homicide cases. So very long time experienced detectives. And that's what I was walking into. So yeah, getting to know them and talk to them. Again, when I walk into a new place and they don't know me, I try to spend the first little bit just getting to know them, asking questions, offering help wherever I can, because they don't know what to expect from me. And it was a new position. So we didn't even really know what I was supposed to be doing. I was just building it. And so I took every opportunity I could to just, even if it wasn't crime analysis related, they put together these books for officer involved shootings, and which is literally just printing off papers and hole punching them and putting them in books. And I would even offer, hey, just let me do that book for you. And it helped me learn their cases. It showed them that I was willing to work with them. We built trust that way.
Yeah, kudos for you for just establishing a relationship with the detectives and to reach out and ask for help and getting a mentor. You are, well, at this time, this was been 2017, so you have almost 20 years of experience by that time. And here you asked to be mentored with IACA. So most of the time when you're talking about folks asking to be mentored in our profession, it's folks that are brand new to the profession or looking to get into the profession. It's not somebody that's 15 plus year experienced analyst. Some advice to everybody is just say never too old to be a mentee.
No, there's no shame in asking for help and admitting you don't know how to do something. I'm a huge fan of that. So anybody who knows me, I will be the first one to admit when I don't know what I'm doing.
All right. So this leads to our analyst badge story. And before I get to the analyst badge story, I wanted a quick shout out to Mindy's Quick Take videos. And Mindy Yoon, who's the co-founder of this podcast, she is creating animated tips and tricks for our YouTube channel. And those will be published the second Thursday of every month. So Check those out. They're animated. They'll help you out on how to improve your job. Now let's get to the analyst badge story. And for those that are maybe new to the show, the analyst badge story is the career-defining case or project that an analyst works on. And for you, Kristen, it is a homicide case from 2017.
Yes. So it was the first case that I was really able to get my hands on and get down and dirty with. And again, this goes back to that connections and just getting to know people. So there was one detective in homicide at that point that I had worked with previously. And so he knew me from the district. We had come from the same district. He just came over to homicide a couple of years before me. And so he was the one that brought this case to me and said, I just got some Google records back and I'm trying to map them in Google Earth, but I can only load 200 at a time and I have 17,000 records. Can you help me? And I had never worked with cell phone data or anything at that point. And I said, probably. I mean, you have an Excel file. I'm sure I can, and you have Latin longs. I'm sure we can make this work. And so I start calling my contacts, and that's our strength, like our superpowers as analysts, right? We have contacts everywhere. And so I just started making phone calls and how can I do this? What do I do? What do I need? We ended up getting Google Earth Pro, and I was able to load those records in, and I was able to share the link with him so that he could start working the case while I was working it. We were looking through, I literally looked through thousands and thousands of records within that. And so what had happened was we had a DV incident here in Mesa, and the female part of it that was the victim of that DV incident, she ended up going home to El Paso, Texas. A couple of days later, the suspect from our DV ends up dead. Turned out that the female had gotten a couple of males to come from El Paso with her to come and kill the victim in Mesa. And so records from Google actually show the path that go from El Paso to Mesa. And between the detective and I, we went through and we broke out all the different stops that they made. And he was able to get surveillance video, and we got Facebook records. And so I was dealing with a lot of the returns on the backside, kind of matching what she was saying in her Facebook records with what was showing on her phone records to put her with the phone. We learned a lot along the way. I had not really worked with social media at that point. So I did a lot of work with our Fusion Center, learning how to understand the records, the returns, looking how to look at the public facing Facebook for information, which was still new to me. I reached out to a lot of people, and it was really my connections with other analysts and detectives who were willing to just drop what they were doing and show me what they knew. And the detective on the case agent, I can't say enough good things about him. I just presented this case yesterday at a training, and he knows I will brag about him all day long, the phenomenal police work. But it was a really cool case to work on because I learned so much during it.
The data that you got from Google, it had to be put into Google Earth?
So I don't know that it had to be. I just didn't have access to anything else.
Oh, okay.
Yes, we had Penlink in our agency. We had Cellhawk in our agency, but honestly, we weren't trained in it. And so I didn't know. And so I knew there were Latin long coordinates in the records, and it shows you how many meters off. And I thought, well, let's just give it a try. And I will say that I'll give a shout out to GeoTime too, because they were one of the people that I called initially. And I said, what do I do with this? And so they gave us a free trial of it, and I popped it into GeoTime too, just to make sure that what I was seeing in Google Earth Pro was matching what they had. And so that was great. That was so nice of them. And it was really helpful to be able to see that and to know that we were on the right track at least. So
where does the Facebook posts come into play with this story?
So a lot of the Facebook, the female, it didn't take her too long to make her sites private. And so we only had access to her public facing comments for a little while. So most of what we got off of Facebook came from the returns from the search warrants. So we had to wait a while to get that, to go through those Facebook returns. And literally it was, I think, probably 1,000 pages of messages for a very short time frame, where I sat down and read every single post and comment and picture that was in there. And that's the beauty of having analysts embedded with the detectives, because they don't have time to sit and go through and digest all of that information. they're looking in the immediate time frame, right? They're looking at placing the person at the time of the crime, where the beauty of the analyst is we have a little bit more time. And so I was able to look at her before and after to really get a picture of who she was and her pattern of life, who she was talking to, who were the relevant people. So we didn't know the two other males at first. And so we were looking for anybody who she could have been with. And so it really took reading through a lot of that.
Yeah. Did you have access to her private messages as well?
In the returns, yes.
Did you say that she hired these folks?
She knew one of them. So, nothing ever comes out in chronological order. So this was very much pieced together, and we didn't have any physical evidence on this case either. So it really came down to those records and the Facebook posts that she was making. So that's really, that was really how we connected the dots. But the DV incident that she was in initially in Mesa was with her boyfriend at the time, and she had a baby, but the baby had a different father who was back in El Paso. So when she went back home, she had met up with the baby's father. So he was one of the players, and then he had a friend who ended up being the other player in this. And that one was the hardest one to identify with all of this, because he was not connected to the female initially. The connection was through the two guys. So trying to get to him, he was the last one that we identified on this.
So then how did this get prosecuted?
After the murder, they left, and we saw that on her phone. They went straight back to El Paso. They did some errands and ran around El Paso for the day. Our murder happened at 3:30 in the morning, Arizona time. And so when they were back in El Paso at that time, they were an hour ahead, which was another lesson learned as an analyst. In Arizona, we don't change time zones. So that was another thing I had to learn really quickly, was how to convert times. But by 4:30 El Paso time, they were headed back to Mexico. So they were going into Mexico to hide. And they spent quite a bit of time there. There was a grand jury warrant issued. They each got $1,000 or $1 million bonds, $1 million bonds. And they were all going to be charged with first-degree murder. So at the end of July, this was in May that the killing happened. In July, at the very end, was when our detectives went to El Paso to make the arrest. So a couple months had passed while we were doing all of this work, and we went and extradited them.
Okay, so they weren't in El Paso. They were still in Mexico, and they were caught and extradited over to the United States.
They had come back from Mexico back into El Paso. At that point, I think they were starting to think they were clear because so much time had passed. So.
Okay. And then did they all get convicted?
They did. Yeah. So the most beautiful part was that, and this actually worked to our favor, was in Texas, 17 is considered an adult. When they made the arrest, the two guys and the girl were placed in the back of a patrol car together to go to jail. And so in Arizona, that would never happen. We would have to separate males and females, and a juvenile would never be placed in a vehicle with an adult. But it was different there. And so they were actually able to be transported together. And so there was Axon in the back of that patrol car going on the whole way. And so we have about 30 minutes of footage of them talking about the crime. And so, and they were very candid, and you can see one of them's laughing, and one of them is saying, we shouldn't have taken no phones. And I mean, the statements that they were making were just gold. Like, it was just great. So we were able to introduce that in trial. So the female ended up taking a plea agreement in exchange for her testimony against the two guys. So she was the last one to be sentenced. So the two guys were sentenced to 25 years to life with the possibility after 25 years. But I should go back and mention that during the killing, our victim's 12-year-old brother was at the scene, and he witnessed it. So because he was so traumatized, the judge tacked on another 5 years plus for the disorderly conduct in front of him. So at a minimum, they would be spending 30 years to the two guys. They would be spending a minimum of 30 years. She was hoping that her plea agreement was going to be for 23 to 25 years, and then she would be released. So she was really hoping that she would get the 23 years for testifying against them. But during her sentencing hearing, the judge said, I really didn't see any remorse. And after watching the video, you can see what you were like when you didn't think the cameras were rolling and people were watching. Your true colors came out. And so that video is that was amazing. If the map wasn't enough, the video it's just great. I laugh every time I watch it. It's so funny.
I think that's interesting that they talked about the cell phones. It's almost as if they knew right away that that's how they got caught.
Well, they did. So going backwards, so our detectives went there, they interviewed them there before we extradited them. And so my detective, he likes to go into interviews prepared. And so he took pictures of all of them at all of the different stops along the way. And he threw down a map and showed them, this is where we know you were. And so they knew that we had the map of the location. So they knew in the back of the car.
It's always nice when they confess.
Yes.
Even though they didn't do it intentionally, right?
Yeah. They were just so cavalier. So by that point, the girl was back with her, the baby's father, the dad at that point. And so they're in the back of the patrol car and they're holding hands and she's kissing on him. And it's just interesting to watch their behavior. I love watching human behavior. And so to me, that's the best part of that video.
Good work. All right, let's go on now I want to talk a little bit about associations. As I mentioned, you're IACA Secretary right now. You are also part of IALEA. One of the things that I find fascinating, and you're active with, or at least we're active with the Arizona Crime Analysis Association as well. What I find interesting is people seem to ask how you get involved with these associations. How do you get involved with a certain committee or become chair of a certain committee, or how do you get involved? And, I think when we talked in the prep show, I was like, well, to me, it's just like, you just do it. And I think back as I was like, oh, well, I was asked to be chair of a committee. So maybe my viewpoint is a little bit skewed because, somebody asked me if I wanted to get in, maybe it would have been a little bit of a challenge. So what advice would you have for folks that are looking to get more involved in any one of these associations?
Yeah, I think ask questions. If you think that there's something that you're interested in, just ask any one of our committee chairs or the board members, or this is across associations, but just ask questions. Hey, how can I become involved? Where do you need help? These are my skill sets, or I can contribute X, Y, or Z. I just want to be involved. Attend meetings so that you get that face time, whether it's virtual or in person. But just put yourself out there so that boards and committees know that there's interest. Because if we don't know that you're interested, then we can't just assume that you are. And so, just for me, I had a difference when the secretary position was coming open. I was fortunate that Mary is local with me. And so I was able to ask her questions, but nobody approached me on it. It was it just seemed like it was the right time in my life to do this. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to ask a little bit more about this. And then I started talking to Adrienne and asking her, well, what does it entail? And how can I get involved in what kinds of projects to make sure it's a good fit? So if you're not asked, ask questions. That's just the best way.
And you're part of two other associations that I find interesting and want to get your advice on. So you're also part of the Arizona Homicide Investigators Association and the Academy of Criminal Justice Sciences. Just talk a little bit about those and why you got into the Academy of Criminal Justice Sciences.
The Homicide Investigators Association, they offer free trainings, and it's a lot like a local version of IACA. So just getting involved with them to get involved with the trainings and, just for the contacts, because I rely so heavily on having directories and knowing who to contact when. And the more people I know that I can reach out to, the better. And so that was the beauty of that one. And that was the group that I just presented for yesterday at their basic homicide school on that El Paso case. So it just built my network of people that are experienced in homicide. So I know who I can reach out to. The Academy of Criminal Justice Sciences, that one was interesting. That one was something that I didn't seek out. And actually, Jason Painich was the one who was involved with that at the time. And when I came in as secretary, he was already going to be doing a presentation at the conference that was supposed to take place in 2020. And coming in as a new board member, I was overseeing that committee for the Student and Ed Affairs. And I also had publications under me. And so it just seemed like a good fit because it kind of brings the two worlds together. It brings the academic world that's looking at criminal justice problems and the practitioner world. And so that's kind of the beauty of that. And it was funny prepping for this after the show. I just realized I need to redo my dues with that association because they just came due. Mm-hmm. But they're releasing publications, but they're looking at crime problems from the more of the academic side. And so it's just always interesting to see it from that angle.
And looking over your resume, one of the things I see here is you have a lot of recognitions. And Not that you don't deserve them. I'm not saying that you do, but it seems like Mesa has done a really good job with recognizing its employees. Of course, you have general ones like Employee of the Quarter and teamwork citations and whatnot, but you also have specific to analysts. You have letters of appreciation for analytical support, and you have commendations for analysis that led to an arrest. So is that unique to Mesa, do you think?
I mean, I hope it's not unique. I would hope that there are some phenomenal analysts and work being done. So I would hope it's not unique. But again, I've just been, I think, really lucky and blessed in my career to work with some really phenomenal people who recognize the value of it. And there was a lot of hard work put in by the analysts too. I mean, we really have to advocate for ourselves and put ourselves out there. And so it's definitely not like these things just came to us, but we are recognized. I mean, I can tell you, I can walk into a meeting and I very much feel like my feedback and recommendations matter and are respected.
Analysts have to talk, right?
Yes.
All right, let's get into IACA. Talked about becoming secretary there. That was going to be one of my questions. Let's just talk about what's the board doing? What are some of the big projects you all are working on?
So I think the joke lately is our daytime jobs are getting in the way. And so because there's just so much that we want to do and there literally aren't enough hours in the day. And so there's a lot of projects with all of our committees. Just a shout out to all of our committee members. I've never seen such hard work and just phenomenal people. Just amaze me every day. But some of the bigger projects that we have going on right now are working to enhance the website. You know, working through the pandemic last year, that was an interesting one. Mm-hmm. Rachel and I came on brand new and, you know, we were just getting our feet wet and then had to figure out how to do business with all of these other factors. So that definitely threw a monkey wrench into things. But the most current projects are really, now we're going to go into the strategic planning session. That's actually set for the end of next week. We'll go into that. But it's really based on feedback from the membership. We just want to make sure that we're staying on the right path, aligned with the vision and mission of IACA in general. So it was nice to see the members who participated in the priority membership survey said that they really valued the training and certification and conference, and then the forums and the ability to network amongst all of those. So those are still the priorities among the membership that we saw in that survey. And so the next part of that was we ran some focus groups to get some feedback and brainstorming sessions on how to improve or continue to offer good services within those core services. And so we'll use all of that feedback next week when we go in, and we've hired a strategic planner who will come in and help us kind of build a guide. We've got all of these recommendations now. Now, how do we implement them in a documented fashion? And so we'll sit down and figure out what that looks like and build a roadmap out for the next 1, 3, 5 years. What do we want to accomplish and see happen down the road so that we make sure that we're growing in the right direction to meet the needs of the membership?
You started out about the idea of, your day jobs are getting in the way. When usually the election time comes around, I think on the website it says you're supposed to spend about 10 hours a week doing this volunteer work. But from the sounds of it, it's more than 10 hours a week. Is that correct?
It definitely is. Yeah. It definitely is. There's nights where Mary and I are on the phone until 11 o'clock at night working. It's, I don't know if she's like, her name is like a curse word to my kids, but they're like, Mary's calling again. It's Mary. Yeah, it's Mary. And I swear Rachel doesn't sleep at all. I don't think, because she's on every single one of our calls and it's like the middle of the night for her. Yeah, it's a lot of work. It's valuable and it's so rewarding. And so I have zero regrets. I would do it all over again, and I would try to promote anybody to do it, but you just have to know what you're signing up for. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's probably why we get so few people running, right? I mean, 10 hours is a big commitment in someone's week. And when you talk about being more than 10 hours and getting up late at night and getting on meetings in the middle of the night, I mean, that's obviously not for everyone. And it is a big commitment.
Yeah. And we are kind of lucky because 4 of us are on the West Coast in the US. So we're all pretty much on the same time zone. It's Rachel who's outside. I can't even fathom what it would look like and how hard it would be to coordinate times to talk when you're in different countries or different, just different time zones across the board. I think that's also a consideration that you have to account for. It's easy right now for us because 4 out of 5 of us are in the same time zone. And so we really just have to factor in when is Rachel available and try to get the best time to connect with her. But that would just make it so much more difficult to run business meetings.
Oh, man. And why have you? I do have another idea to put on your plate. Not that I haven't given enough already, but you talked about the internship and the volunteer aspect of it and how that was so crucial to your career. Is Mesa still doing that volunteer program, by the way?
Yeah, we do have the volunteer program in all kinds of different areas, and it's up to each one of us. One of my volunteers is actually getting ready to start with Scottsdale PD, so I've lost her, but yeah, I love my volunteers.
Yeah, ICA needs to have somebody that's going to champion the internship and volunteer opportunities to these departments. And we certainly have colleges and universities, what Jason and Painage is doing, helping the students, helping the colleges acclimate to the profession. But we almost need a position for an internship. And I think I even mentioned it, Mary, on her episode, is just like the internship czar. Call it whatever you want. But the idea is that we need to go to these departments that we have an agreement with, ask them, okay, why don't you have any kind of internship or volunteer program? What's stopping you? And how can the association help get one started if they don't have one, or create more? Because that is a great gateway to go from college and get your foot in the door, as you've just laid out here in how you discovered the profession.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great idea. I would love to see us have one of those positions that, does coordinate with the different departments. A lot of departments do have these programs. They're not advertised well enough. And so even if we just collected that and shared that information, maybe incorporating it with mentoring, and there's all kinds of different avenues that we could incorporate it into, but definitely a central point of contact who's managing that and managing the different types of opportunities and kind of guiding the agencies. So a lot of agencies would love to have them, they just don't know how to utilize them.
Yeah.
So somebody who can help on both.
Yeah, well, I do hear that the city won't allow it, or the department won't allow it. And it's kind of strange to hear that. I'm like, why? What won't they allow? Or I also have heard the union won't allow it. I have heard that.
Oh.
There's several obstacles there. What is real, what is not, but definitely a way to beef up the volunteer internships that are available in department is a worthwhile endeavor.
Yeah. And I wonder if we're hearing some of that because, some agencies bring on volunteers and they don't necessarily put them through. Maybe it's because they're not putting them through a full background check. Like ours, we put you through an entire background check.
Mm-hmm.
You're going through basically what an employee goes through.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe those are some of the restrictions that we can look at.
There's lots to it. I'm sure that, you start surveying folks that don't have, or departments that don't have programs, you're going to get all kinds of reasons why they don't. And so there's probably going to be several hurdles to get through to get it established.
Yes. And it's not easy to have. I mean, that's extra work, right? On top of your own day-to-day tasks, you have to be able to think about projects and hopefully make them beneficial to that volunteer intern, not just give them data entry projects, but show them why it's relevant to their career path.
Mm-hmm. And I think another thing that you would have to teach is getting past the mindset of, well, by the time I teach that internship how to do it, I could have had it done. And
yes.
It's almost like project assignment. You almost have to have a nice framework. This is the recommended way, best practices, standard operating procedure of how the projects are done. And it's really should be meant to alleviate some of the work that employees are already doing, right? You need to make it so it's a win-win for everybody. The analyst is getting experience and more work is being accomplished at the department.
Right. It should be value added.
There you go. You said it a lot better than me.
Yeah. It shouldn't be a supplement. It should be value added.
Yes, exactly. Anything coming up? I mean, other than the conference with the association?
So strategic planning, the conference, we're so excited about conference, just at the sense that some sort of normalcy is coming and just excited to face with people a little bit more. I know we're exploring some options for international membership because we understand that there's still restrictions in place. So trying to overcome some of those hurdles. Those are the two big things. I think that there's going to be a lot that comes out of the strategic planning session that will kind of reshape or refocus some of the effort. So I'm excited. I think we're all really excited to see what comes out of this.
Yes, I'm super excited about the conference. I think the association lucked out because if you had your conference normally in the spring, it got canceled again. Like IALEA's got canceled again. And so they go 2 years with being canceled. The IACA is going to squeak by with having theirs in August. So I think it's, even though it's going to be August in Vegas, which is going to be hot, but it's still, it's going to be great to see people again and to get back to, as you said, some sense of normalcy.
Yeah. So the other two things real quick are, I know we have a booth that's set up. It'll be in August as well, right before. So we're going to be presenting at the International Homicide Investigators Association. And then the big one will be at the International Chiefs of Police Conference in September. So we'll really be pushing crime analysis at both of those.
Very good. Thank you for all that you do. And as you mentioned, it is a lot of work. And it's a lot to be secretary, right? To get all this down and to keep everybody on track and document. So it's really crucial work that you do. And I do really appreciate it. And so does many others.
Well, thank you. And we appreciate the members and, just the feedback. So keep it coming. It's never too much, I don't think. I'd rather get more than less.
All right. Well, let's finish up then. I always like to talk about personal interests. And you're a hockey fan. So it's playoff time in the National Hockey League here in the States. So who's your team?
Well, because my main team didn't make it, that would be the Coyotes. I have to stick with my state, right?
Okay.
But my team is the Islanders. So I'm super excited right now about that.
So how did you become an Islanders fan?
Family in New York. It's a different experience. So in Arizona, the fan base isn't as exciting as it is, I think, on the East Coast. They really get into their games and it's really easy to get sucked in when you go to a game back there. And so, yeah, they're my team.
Yeah. And now, when did you start watching hockey?
I grew up going to rinks for minor league games. My mom and her friend group used to go and the kids would run around. And I remember running around the rink, but then they would keep running and I would just find myself sitting and watching the game. And so it's interesting. I say that I'm a hockey fan. I love the beauty of the sport. I don't necessarily track stats and, I don't follow trends and all of that, but I just love watching them. It's such a talent and I just get lost in the game.
Oh man.
And my son plays, so I love it even more that way.
Oh yes. How old's your son?
He'll be 16 in July.
Oh man. Does he get decent ice time? Because I always hear stories about folks that play recreationally ice hockey. Sometimes they'll have midnight games. It's just whenever you can get the ice time.
Yeah. So I mean, it's definitely spread out all over the place. It could be late at night. It could be early in the morning. It could be anytime over the weekend. As far as playing time, he's a goalie, so he's out there for the entire game. So that makes it fun. Yeah. So I couldn't have kids without one of them being a hockey player.
You're like your husband. You're like, hey, we're trying till we get a hockey player. That's the rule. So no arguing.
So yeah, I love it.
Interesting. It's funny when I watch hockey, I admire the speed, but then because they're on ice, there's some moments that are like, it seems so slow and why can't they get to the right position? But it's so fast and they're on ice and they'll sometimes skate right past the puck, or it just seems from your vantage point, it almost seems slow to where they're trying to get to the puck or get to the player, but it's obviously so fast. But as from the audience side, there's so many moments that I thought, oh, that seemed like it was so slow.
Yeah, there's definitely times when you're watching the game and you're like, how did you not see that? He'll get off the ice and we'll say, how did you not drop that fast? And then he usually tells me, Mom, you don't know what you were talking about. So now
I happened to be in Nashville a couple years back when the Predators made it to the Stanley Cup Finals. Nashville does a really good event. So I highly recommend to you, if you get a chance to go watch a hockey game in Bridgestone Arena in Nashville. It's fantastic, and they do such a great job. It's right there on Broadway in Nashville, and they'll shut Broadway down sometimes and have concerts. And when they were going through their Stanley Cup run, it was really interesting because they would secretly have who was singing the national anthem. It would be a different country music star, and then they would also have a secret concert outside the arena as well. And so it was way more of an entertainment value, just a huge package, made it an event. And so I do recommend, if you get a chance, if you haven't already, to go out to see one in Nashville.
Yeah, I haven't. If you put, that would be my third team. So they would be number 3, the Preds, but I've never been to one of their games there.
Well, maybe. No, we'd have to push the conference later in the year and then make it to Nashville. So that's the way you could get there via the IACA. So
I'll see what I can do.
And there you go. All right. Well, Kristen, our last segment of the show is Words to the World. And this is where I give the guest the last word, and you can promote any idea that you wish. Kristen, what are your words to the world?
So I guess my words to the world, since we just got done talking about hockey, to quote Wayne Gretzky, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So, we are all afraid of failing, but we just can't be. If you want to do something, go for it. It might not work out the first time, but keep going.
Excellent. Well, I leave every guest with, you've given me just enough to talk bad about you later. I do appreciate you being on the show, Kristen. Thank you so much, and you be safe.
Thank you. You too, Jason.
Thank you for joining us today on Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. We hope you not only enjoyed the show, but also learned something new. For more information on our guests and information relating to today's topic, please visit our website at leapodcast.com. Special thanks to the Rough and Tumble for our theme song. For more of their music, you can visit their website at theroughandtumble.com. Also thanks to Kyle McMullen for our show logo. For more of his design, please visit his website at moderntype.com. The show is hosted, recorded, and edited by Jason Elder and written by me, Mindy. You can contact us both via the LEA Podcast website. Please join us again next time as we interview another expert in this great field.